Hello, my friends, and welcome to the CineFix Top 100, the deep space mission that, according to Dr. Hessline's theory, will result in us watching 100 of the greatest movies ever made. I'm Clint Gage, and joining me, as always, defender of the faith and also science, Alex Stedman. Alex, how we doing?
I'm good. How are you, Clint?
Good. Hanging in. Hey, we got a little bit left here in our season 3. Starting to feel a little less alone against the world by the day.
It's been a long up and down season. It's been a wild one.
Honestly, it really has. Wild one, I think, is the right way to describe this season.
Season 2 felt like so much more consistent. This one just feels like hit and miss.
Yeah, it's been all over the place, and none of us like any of the movies. It's weird. But we do have a surprise today, because joining us for the very first time is CineFix's chief Planet of the Apes expert, and out of anybody that we work with, he's currently closest to the Statue of Liberty. It's Scott Collura, everybody. Hello, Scott. Welcome to CineFix, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm glad that you guys went super negative right before introducing me, because that feels appropriate. Oh, it's the worst season ever. And here's Scott.
Scott, yeah, no pressure. You have to save this entire thing.
Listen, it's all uphill from here, buddy.
And most of it is up to you. Yeah. We've been phoning it in for several episodes now, so.
I thought it was more, we bring Scott in when we know it's all done. There's no chance of recovery, and, it's like,
You're sort of the like season 8 zany neighbor that gets introduced to boost ratings or something.
Like the executive producer's cousin.
In addition to being our executive producer's cousin, you are one of IGN's best and most well-seasoned sci-fi nerds, I would argue. Cal, who is not here, unfortunately, he couldn't make this episode. I'm told it's not because of a kidney stone, but it is something for work that he considers equally as painful. So at least there's that. But Scott, you were nice enough to pinch hit for us, and we're lucky to have you this week because we're talking about, as I understand it, your favorite movie of all time.
Damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
No, we're watching the first one. We're watching Planet of the Apes this week.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the second one.
Just the fact that you assumed we were talking about Beneath is like, that's all the bona fides we need. Like, you're the perfect person to fill in for this.
Or that I think that's funny, and I assume other people are going to even understand why preferring the second one would be funny. No one gets
You're in the
joke.
Right company for that, I feel. If you're going to do that joke anywhere.
I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to talk about Chuck Heston. He's aces.
Who you're on a nickname basis with Chuck, which is great. But Planet of the Apes, 1968, it's the tale of astronaut George Taylor getting marooned out of space and time on a mysterious planet inhabited by those damned titular apes. Chuck Heston, as we've already established, stars in this one at the height. I would argue this is at the height of his sort of screaming at the heavens to no one in particular style of acting. I think this is probably like the beginning of that sort of high watermark for him that crests. Well, I don't know, when was Soylent Green was after this, a couple of years after this, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I don't think you get Soylent Green as people without Get Your Paws Off Me, You Damn Dirty Apes. So this is the beginning of a very good run for your buddy Chuck Heston. We always start, Scott, because I know you don't listen to the show.
I hate it.
We always start by talking about what was like your first experience with this movie. Because to be honest, like, I think this is a movie that it's one of the hardest movies to watch these days with any amount of context for when it first came out. Because I have no real sense of the first time that I saw this movie. I think the first time I saw this movie was the episode of The Simpsons with the musical version that Troy McClure was in. Like that and Spaceballs, I know that I saw before the real Planet of the Apes, but I got those jokes somehow because Planet of the Apes is so sort of ingrained and ubiquitous and whatever any of those words I think would probably apply to it. But like, Scott, how long have you been a fan of Planet of the Apes?
Well, so I am older than you guys, and
not by much.
Not by much. It had to do with Dr. Haslin's time theory, I think, is how I wound up older than you. But my viewing of the Apes movies predates The Simpsons and Spaceballs. They used to do a movie of the week thing like once a year on our local ABC affiliate. They'd play a different Apes movie every day. but for some reason, they'd split the first film up over 2 days. So after school, I'd come home, you'd watch 1968 Planet of the Apes Part 1, and then Part 2 on Tuesday, and then they'd play Beneath, the best Planet of the Apes movie, on Wednesday. And then they'd run out of days, so there's 5 original movies. They'd never play the 5th one, because they played Part 1 as 2 parts. So I never knew the 5th one existed.
What, Conquest? Or what was the 5th?
Battle
Back
for
to
the Planet
Return of...
of
They ran out of prepositional phrases. That's why they had to stop making them.
The apes strike back.
So I think my experience is a bit different from you guys and from most people, really these days. Is that because like the Simpsons thing, and then Alex, I think you said before we were recording, all the memes and stuff as well, based on the Simpsons and Spaceballs. Like it's okay to put the last shot of this movie's twist ending on the cover of the DVD because you're spoiling nobody, basically.
I think we'll spoiling a little bit for the movie list section of this episode. Like the Statue of Liberty is on a thumbnail for our video of best twists of all time. So like it doesn't matter, like it's one of those things that, and I don't have any concern about doing that, or I didn't 10 years ago or whenever we made them.
No, everybody knows.
It is funny that you guys say that because I watched this movie first. I think it was a college movie for me. It was like definitely young adulthood. And I was like, I didn't know the twist. Like, I don't know if I just wasn't on the internet enough. I got to be genuinely shocked by that twist. And I am so glad I got to be shocked by that twist. It's such a good twist if it's not spoiled. And that's impossible
amazing.
It's impossible to have it not be spoiled now in the year 2024. But I was just really lucky. Like, I don't know what it was. I just, like I said, I wasn't on the internet much anymore. There's also certain things in Star Wars that weren't spoiled for me when I caught up to them finally in my early 20s. Like, I just happy and oblivious. But yeah, it's a great twist.
That's great.
I know it was awesome.
I know. I'm having this weird mixture of emotions where I'm simultaneously like wildly jealous, but also like that's wonderful for you that you got to do that.
No, there's like a few movies like that. Like I remember, I think Citizen Kane I got to experience organically, and I was like, oh, Rosebud. Like,
Got it.
It's so I just don't know if I wasn't on the internet as a teenager.
Right. Yeah.
No, I mean, before like all of the memes and everything, and I was even talking with Tayo, our producer, about it beforehand about like, a couple of specific shots from this movie that like he was aware of because of memes. But like for me in my age group, like, and I'm sure Cal would be in the same situation, like, coming up in the 90s and the Simpsons ruined so many movies. Not ruined, but the Simpsons, like, I would see movies later and be like, oh, that's what that Simpsons joke is. Like I would get the Simpsons joke retroactively when I saw the movie that they were joking about. And like that's how a lot of these classic movies for me, like, I mean, half of Stanley Kubrick is joked about in The Simpsons. And like it wasn't even just the Planet of the Apes or like the big popcorn stuff. Like, but anyway, all day long I've had I hate every ape I see from chimpan-A to chimpanzee stuck in my head because that's frankly one of the funniest lines of comedy ever written.
It's really good.
So smart. It's so stupidly brilliant. But we're not here to talk about The Simpsons. Well, maybe one of these days. Honestly, we'll talk about The Simpsons plenty because of what I was just talking about. I can't imagine we're not going to cover other movies that The Simpsons joked about. But to get into the pedigree of this movie a little bit, it came out and it was a hit in 68. Like it made a ton of money. Critically, everybody more or less loved it. There were of course some people that were like, meh. I thought it was dumb, kind of reviews.
I mean, there's always those people.
Yeah. Oh, it's been me in the past. Like I get it. It's fine. But it was nominated for Best Original Score and Best Costumes, both of which I think are deserved. And then it got an honorary Oscar for John Chambers and his makeup, which was in the days before makeup had its own category. And they were just like, hey, that's incredible what you did. Here's a trophy, which is always fun to see. In thinking about this movie and it being sort of impossible to watch out of context or in context, like the legacy of this movie is really something else too, because I mean, Charlton Heston was the big name. Obviously, he went from being Moses and Ben-Hur and all of that in the 50s, and Michelangelo in that one movie, to now he's crash landing on the Planet of the Apes, which is kind of a fun shift for him.
As you say, Heston, he played these sort of aspirational figures, and he's in these biblical films. I think he played Michelangelo. And then when he takes on the role of Taylor here in Planet of the Apes, it's like he's suddenly playing this guy who's almost the opposite of that in a way, in that he's anti-mankind, he's anti-aspirational, he doesn't believe in anything anymore. It's an interesting turn for him. I don't know what was going on in Heston's personal life, if it was somehow informing that decision, but it kind of then tracks in his early 70s stuff, like you mentioned Soylent Green, and he also did The Omega Man, which is another sci-fi movie from the early 70s, where he kind of took these more nihilistic roles, right? Like it's like I don't believe in anything. The world is coming to an end. It's all gone to shit, which is kind of different from he's in Bible movies, right? So
I will say that I do think they're similar in the sense that it's these characters that are sort of like very, very confident, but also sort of toiling under a kind of tyrannical boot, so to speak. So Taylor is right in line with like Michelangelo in Agony and the Ecstasy, like butting heads with the Pope. There's a similar vein there to it. But I wonder if it was just the counterculture in the late 60s and the civil rights movement and everything that was, if it was just I'm swimming with the tide here, like it's the same character, but I'm just going from the other side of it it is a different, because it was a B movie. And this is one of the things that I love so much about science fiction in general, is there's these movies that like it can be as pulpy as you want, The Blob and movies like that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can have Children of Men, that's like this really, grounded and dramatic, very relevant science fiction. And then occasionally you get these movies that have it both ways, right? Which I love. And I think Planet of the Apes is one of the best examples of it. There's Alien that we talked about a couple weeks ago that has that going for it. They Live, to a certain degree, I think has the same thing. But Planet of the Apes might be the best example of like super pulp with actual like social relevance.
Well, the thing is, I this was like one of those like budget issue things too. I remember reading that in the early versions of the script, the Ape Society was way more advanced when Taylor came across it. But just because it was so expensive to do that, they kind of like reeled it in a little bit. And I feel like that's so much better. Like I'm trying to imagine a movie where they're walking through these like fake like ape spaceships or like offices, and I feel like that would just look even more campy and wouldn't hold up. I think the fact that it's like kind of this like, I don't know, scarier jungle setting and it feels more wild adds to it so much more. It's like a little lower-fi while still being very like over the top kind of.
Yeah,
I was reading a little bit about that too. Like, because Rod Serling, here's the other part of the pedigree that we need to talk about, is the Rod Serling of it all, like the Twilight Zone. And I think the most reductive way to describe this movie is like, well, it's a Twilight Zone episode that they stretched out, which is not untrue.
That's kind of how I feel about it, though. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think you can give it a little more credit than that, but it's certainly not untrue. But apparently he wrote the first draft. It was based on a book. And then a guy, Michael Wilson, who's a fascinating dude. He was blacklisted in the 50s, but he won Academy Awards. And I mean, he wrote Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia and movies like that. And he was blacklisted for a handful of years. And so he's bringing some of that experience into his treatment of Planet of the Apes, which I think, it's one of the things that really makes the movie work and makes it still relevant, is like, that's, there are monologues in this movie that you could say right now and it would still make sense. Like that's one of my other favorite things about science fiction.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I mean, you joked about it in your intro, but the fact that Dr. Zaius he's like the head of science, the government science division, but he's also the leader of the church. It's like, well,
Defender of the faith, yeah.
And they just kind of dash that line off in a way, but I think Taylor might make fun of it, or kind of mocks him for it. But it's like, what is this? How does that work? So the movie is, like you say, it is pulpy, but it's definitely commenting on aspects of society from the time. I mean, there's also the whole riff with the younger chimpanzees, Zira's nephew, I think he is.
The beatnik chimp.
Yeah, yeah. And he's fascinated by Taylor shaving, and he's like, oh, well, the kids back home your age, they never shave or something like that. It's just like,
and he's even like, don't trust anybody over 30.
That's right.
there's a handful, and that's one of the things that I think like allows this movie to kind of have it both ways, right? Because there are legit dad jokes in this movie, right? Like it's like there's even there's one shot where it's the tribunal where they're sitting there in the hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil poses, and it's things like that. That's just like,
yeah,
you guys
go there.
Okay, great.
It's
let's
so
move past
on the nose, but I loved it.
Sustain!
Their speech organs are adequate. The flaw lies not in anatomy, but in the brain.
Objection! Sustain!
You could see how maybe nowadays people wouldn't take to it because the ape makeup was great for the time. I mean, I still think of it as great, but like they don't really seem like they're apes. They seem like they're humans wearing prosthetics, right? Like there's nothing really apish about them in the way they carry. The new movies obviously have the technology to have them. They are apes who you kind of believe can talk, but there's things about this which the believability factor can crack so easily, and especially when they're doing one-liners like "see no evil, hear no evil," the three. So the fact that like Alex said, you're able to watch it now, having not seen it since college, and enjoy it. Like I take great pleasure in hearing that, because I worry sometimes that these older movies just will fade, because the technology, the visual aspects don't hold up anymore. This was made the same year as 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? And I mean 2001.
68. 2001: A
so,
Space Odyssey was made this year, and even 2001: A Space Odyssey, like in terms of the effects, like just Star Wars a decade later looks, I mean, better, but not that much better. I think it was paced up in a way that 2001 didn't necessarily do.
Yeah,
but like no, I mean, all of those movies, like the camp of it is a little more front and center to watch it that way.
I really do feel like the apes looking unrealistic. I was kind of watching it on my rewatch as a horror movie. I don't know why. I feel like really early getting that hunt scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That hunt scene is scary. And I feel like having them in the prosthetics just looking unnatural just made it feel like you were in more of a nightmare. I feel like that's why I really enjoyed it more on a rewatch. Like, I don't know why people don't talk about like it more as a horror movie. It is scary if you watch it a certain way.
Well, and also, like, I had the same thought about the first time that Zira goes to meet, like, Taylor's laying there on the, getting a blood transfusion. And Zira walks up, and just like we're kind of looking up at her, and the way that her face is shaped and everything, like she looks like kind of a gargoyle, like coming up. Like she does look legitimately scary, and she's the only nice ape in the entire movie. There's 2.5 of them, but
yeah, and she does horrifically scary things to most of the humans, right? Like she does like live vivisections or something, right? Like they kind of talk about
doing
it.
Lobotomies and they're gelding them and all of those, it's
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like there's two ways to watch this movie. You can watch it as like high camp sci-fi, or like you can do what I did and decide to randomly get really scared of it, which is what happened this time.
They put Taylor through the ringer also, right? It's not just that hunt scene. I mean, they're
probing him and all kinds of stuff to begin with. And then there's a really spooky like dissolve where there's that first doctor's like, where's my probe? There's no probe here. And one of his assistants goes and gets it. And that scene ends with him like coming at Taylor with just that thing, and then it dissolves, and then when we meet him, we see him later, he's in a cell like curled up in the fetal position. So it's like they were oh
my god. And the moment where he finds his friend in the museum, I can't remember his name, I think Dodge.
Listen, we're already getting into some brilliant moments. We'll get into this, but just we touched on it for a second, but I just want to talk about 1968, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes, obviously, Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby, Once Upon a Time in the West, Barbarella, and I guess The Moon Landing, if you want to consider that. That was 69.
That was shot by Kubrick too, right?
Shot by Kubrick also.
That's what I heard.
But like sci-fi in the late 60s, and like they were doing good work. And again, like this is coming off of the 50s where the bulk of it was the Blob and Them and Forbidden Planet and things like that, and a lot of B movie stuff. But granted, there was Godzilla mixed in there, and with an Invasion of the Body Snatchers came out of the 50s too, and so there was some like allegorical stuff happening too, right alongside all that other stuff. But like mid-century science fiction is some of my favorite. Like I love what they were doing in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you provided all that context, because I was actually going to ask Scott, like, when I was, doing research for this movie, I was kind of wondering where this kind of stands in the context of sci-fi on film. I was kind of thinking, like, did this help popularize it in the lead up to, like, Star Wars? But I think this is really just in the thick of the rising wave of it. Like, there's just so much at this time.
Yeah, as Clint said, it started to swing back in this direction. But, like, I think the success of Planet of the Apes definitely... well, for one thing, the fact that it spawned sequels was a big sort of shift in the genre, because sequels really, until like Star Wars sort of, were not generally a thing, right? Like they were usually, they got less money to make sequels. They were seen as probably less like artistically interesting.
There was also no home
filmmakers.
Video market.
Right.
There was no like backup plan. If it doesn't make its money in the first 3 weeks, it's a waste of time. Like, so.
Exactly. Yep. And so the Apes movies really kind of, although they, each Apes movie, I believe, did cost less money and did kind of become a little cheaper, even in terms of who was directing and starring.
By the way, can I just really butt in real quick and talk about Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which is the one where Zira and Cornelius travel like back to our time, and they're just hanging out in Manhattan in the 70s.
Yeah, they do a reverse
I haven't
Taylor.
seen that. I've never seen that one.
So good. Honestly, like, yeah, because I'm glad you brought up the sequels, because that's a huge part of the legacy of this movie, I think. But like, and they made them quick. They made one a year from 70 to 73.
Pretty much.
So they were just rapid firing these sequels, and they get a little nuts.
They do.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes is wild. It's like this sequel. The immediate sequel goes to like a race of psychic mutants worshiping a nuclear bomb. Like, it's insane. Which is, it was funny because like I kind of lump it in. It reminds me of Rambo in a way, right? Because First Blood was a legit, like, it was drama about how we treat our veterans, right? It's an anti-war film about coming home from Vietnam. But then First Blood Part 2, which is called Rambo: First Blood Part 2, he's like posing with a rocket launcher on the poster. It's one of those things where it's like, it's those sequels that only kind of half get what made the first movie so good.
Totally.
No, I do think, I mean, and to your point about Star Wars, Alex, like, they're both Fox movies, and sci-fi being a genre that was generally pulpier and generally made on the cheap, and not the return on it was never quite as a sure thing. I don't know if Star Wars gets made if Planet of the Apes isn't a hit.
Yeah.
Because like Star Wars wasn't that expensive of a movie. But like gambling on it to like, go ahead. Because the success of Planet of the Apes was just a couple years in the rearview mirror. It might not get made, because it's the same group of executives, I'm sure, that were saying yes to it, because
it really did franchise out in a way that I don't think was the norm back then. It was they made the 4 sequels, then they made a TV show, then they made an animated TV show, and there's all kinds of merchandising and stuff as well. I mean, like, you can't tell me George Lucas didn't notice that stuff when he was deciding to make a sci-fi movie. So. And then obviously, as we know, the franchise still continues to this day. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was actually good. I couldn't believe it.
Good.
So
no, the Andy Serkis trilogy, I think, is the worst naming convention ever. They really messed it up.
Oh my God, I hate it.
Dawn and Rise and War, like, it feels out of order.
Try writing headlines, by the way, with these gosh dags. Like, we get it.
Oh man, well, and with writing headlines with the Planet of the Apes, the Rise of the Planet of the, like, that's too many characters. Like, we have character limits in our headlines. guys. Like, think about us, please, when you're titling these movies.
Let's find a happy medium between Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Men. Like, let's find somewhere between those two movies for titles.
Men and Us and It.
Yeah.
And no, we don't need those. Are impossible
it's
to
the
search
worst.
anyway.
It's the worst. Oh my God.
Men movie. You have to find a way to put movie in every.
No, it's like Men parentheses 2023 is what you have to do.
I really do feel like I don't know if this is a real word, but it feels like the most franchised movie in some ways in history, in a way that's kind of unlikely. Like, when I was trying to remember how much I've seen of Planet of the Apes, the franchise, I was like, I don't even remember. Like, I know I've seen some of the new movies. I know I've seen some of the old, but like, it's just so big and it's so vast. Like, it's crazy to me watching this movie that it all spawned from this kind of campy but still really good sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think like Heston didn't want to come back for the sequel. Like they wound up talking him into it, but he's only in the sequel for like 20 minutes. It's all the stuff you don't like, the opposite of what a franchise is now, right? Where the person is Daisy Ridley is signed on for 10 movies or whatever from Go, you know. And I think the producer of Planet of the Apes probably would have kept going, but he died suddenly in like the mid 70s, and I'm not super clear on it off the top of my head on what happened there, but I have a feeling that's when it sort of petered out in the mid 70s. Otherwise, maybe there would have been even another TV show or something, you know. So
because there wasn't much from the mid 70s all the way through to Burton's remake in 98 or whenever that was.
Yeah, I think they did some comic books maybe, but that was kind of it. You know?
I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff.
And then the fact that Burton blew it, and then they still came back.
Right, that's also crazy to me. Like, the remake wasn't good, and they were still like, let's do it again.
You gotta. If you own IP, you keep trying until you get it right. Those are the rules.
My theory is stop remaking good things and start remaking bad things that could be good. Yeah. So
it's the Ocean's 11 school of rule of remakes. Just pick a bad movie that people remember, kinda. And those are the movies that you need to remake, and those are the ones that end up being good. You know.
Yeah.
But I guess the sequels of Planet of the Apes kind of defanged the movie to a degree, you know, that I think is open season. Like, go ahead, go nuts, remake Planet of the Apes. It's goofy, and we all know what it is, and go ahead. And then they used the Lincoln Memorial as instead of the Statue of Liberty in Burton's one. That's one of the worst endings ever, full stop.
Yeah, it was just, let's have a twist ending just for a twist ending, but it doesn't make any sense. Like,
why'd they do that? What was the lot like?
Listen, I don't want to know. I would like to move on. So sorry I brought it up. Let's get into some brilliant moments.
I think my first official one is the hunt that I brought up earlier, but I kind of like talking broadly about the first 20 minutes, which isn't the strongest part of the movie for me. But what really sticks out for me in that first 20 minutes when they're exploring the island is the sound design and the score, because it's really oppressive in a very in a way that surprised me, because I feel like the rest of the score for the rest of the movie is kind of restrained at times, but it's almost like the movie wants you to feel uncomfortable when you shouldn't yet. There are times where it's really piercing when they're just walking around nature, and it's wild to me. My dog didn't like it. My dog was freaking out. So that's when I always know the sound design is popping off.
No, it's a good metric. How much does my dog hate this movie?
She hates this movie.
Yeah, and I think in these it's a gorgeous sequence to look at too. Like, they used the hell out of that landscape. And I think it was Arizona or somewhere like that, but just that desert looking just unfamiliar enough, and the sound design. We talked about this in the Truman Show last week about, creating something that feels just off center enough that it registers as it's something in your sort of caveman brain is like, I'm not comfortable with this. And I think this opening 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, does a really great job of that. Because even just like having them paddle through a canyon, it's like they feel sort of hemmed in, and they're off, they're heading somewhere that's dangerous that they shouldn't go, is kind of the vibe that it feels like.
No, it's funny that you brought up the Truman Show, because I was thinking about it. We just talked about it for an hour 2 weeks ago, but I was thinking about it during this opening sequence. It's just this great way of making you feel uneasy, even though narratively you have no reason to yet.
Yeah, there's plenty of movie left. Like, I'm aware of feature-length runtimes, so it's like somebody's going to survive this, but I don't know who.
So it's funny that you say that you don't like the first 20 minutes that much, because I actually love the fact that it takes so long before we get to the apes. Well, I love all the Taylor's such an asshole, right?
Thank you. I can't stand him. We're going to talk more about that, but continue.
Listen, no, let's talk about it right now, because that's a note that I made too. Like, the choice to make him such a hard son of a bitch of a cynic is I think really interesting. With that cynical laugh when he's putting the little flag in.
Oh my God.
And it like zooms past him. Like, he's a proper villain in that moment. Like, that's how we treat villains. Like, in the language of cinema, he's a bad guy right there.
Well, to bring up another past CineFix episode, it reminded me of when we were talking about Rear Window, just kind of like crapping on the Jimmy Stewart character. He kind of reminds me of a protagonist in the same vein, where it's like, I don't like you. It's not that I'm not rooting for you, because like at a certain point, the movie just puts him through so much that it's like, all right, let's get him out of there. But it's such an interesting choice to make him such a villain, like early on. And he makes some choices later where I'm just like, oh, you're bad and stupid. Like, it made me so mad. But no, you're totally right. I don't know why it sets it up like this, but I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like it's ironic, right? It's I don't know if it's Serling or Michael Wilson, but it's the irony that this person who hates humankind is the last chance for humankind in a way, right? But it's like the movie sort of ends and it's Adam and Eve, right? They find the Statue of Liberty, but if the story ends there, you hope that they're going to go off and repopulate the human race, right? But like, how ironic, what a Serling twist, that it would be this guy who he wanted to get away from the human race. But it's almost like they drive it home too hard in those opening scenes. Like, he does not have to be such a jerk to the only other guys on the planet with him, So.
I don't know. I think you do, though, because like there's so much shorthand going on, particularly with a star like Charlton Heston, like your guy Chuck. Like, there's baggage that comes along with him, and there's baggage that comes along with putting him in this role. And we're going to keep talking about the last episode, because like it was the same deal with putting Jim Carrey in the Truman Show. It's like, what? This movie wasn't very funny. It's like, it wasn't supposed to be. You just think it was because it was Jim Carrey, and like, so like, I do think that you do have to do a little more heavy lifting with Charlton Heston here to make sure that 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 you don't like him, because you're just so conditioned to like, well, that's Moses and he's a hero, and right, that's where we are in the late 60s. One of the things that I really like about this movie, and it's sort of the beginning, but it's also the very end, is the bookended monologues that they do, which I think is a really sharp part of the script. His last recording, where he's talking about like, he does that wistful sort of like, does man still make war against his brothers? Keep his neighbor's children from starving? And then at the end, when Dr. Zaius is reading like, scroll 27 or whatever, and he says more or less the same thing. Like, man will, he'll kill his brother to take his property and all of that. So like the bookending of the two of them, of Taylor and of Zaius, sort of, they get it. Like, they both get it. And like, so I think making him this, it's easy to see Dr. Zaius as somebody that looks down on humanity, but I think you have to try a little extra hard to make sure that Charlton Heston is coming across like that. And
that makes
nailed
sense.
It does. He's a prick.
Well, the thing about those two guys is, they're both pricks, Zaius and Taylor, but they're both right. They're also both right. Like, Zaius is the movie's villain, but everything that he's afraid of, he has a reason to be afraid of. He knows what's in the neutral zone. He knows that mankind wiped itself out, and he might not know all the specifics, but like, he has a reason to be afraid of Taylor, and he's protecting his people ultimately,
No, Zaius is a fascinating character. He's really good. And that's one thing that, like, Koba in the more recent trilogy was the same way. He's a villain that's like, he's kind of right.
Yeah, he's got a point. Yeah,
he's not super wrong.
But I do appreciate, too, how Taylor is this kind of, like, while being right and while kind of knowing what's up, he is also this kind of encapsulation of why humanity failed. It's like hubris. And he is the embodiment of it. And it's this great little, like, punch of irony of someone who thinks he's above it, and yet his hubris knocks him back down throughout the rest of the movie. It's kind of a nice little touch that they do there.
Wait till you see Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Alex.
I can't.
I'm
honestly,
see him get knocked down.
You need to watch all 4 of the sequels. They're
now I kind of wish I like marathoned it before this episode. That would have been fun.
You might want to after this, and we'll report back. We got one more episode this season. You can check back in.
But back to what you were saying about just the soundscape of those first 25 minutes, Alex, like there's a moment, because I was thinking the same thing. And when I was watching it, and like there's the scene when they first come, they've crash landed into the water, and they're just fresh out of cryogenic sleep, and the ship is sinking. And then you hear this screech. Oh, they turn and they see Stewart, the woman crew member who didn't make it, her pod cracked open. And then you only sort of see her desiccated corpse for a second, and then this sound kicks in of this like sort of screeching, which is the water leaking into the ship, but it's also Jerry Goldsmith's score, I think. It's just this weird this mixing of elements that is so effective, and like you said, so unsettling as well.
It's like unpleasant. Really... It like hurts your ears if your sound is too loud. It hurt my dog's ears.
It hurt. Yeah, your dog hated it. You know what it reminds me of too? That one of the movies more recently that I think does a great job of that is he does it a bunch in Denis Villeneuve's films. He does in Dune. Does a great job of it. Blade Runner 2049 also, I think we talked some about this, but like those bits of sound design that feel like they're originating from something. It feels diegetic, but also it feels like part of the score. Like it also feels like it's just there to like, this is the cue that hits when we show the scary thing, and Norman Bates turns his mother's chair around, and like those kinds of spikes in the score. But really it also feels diegetic and feels like it's sourced in the universe, which any time you can get something doing double duty like that, it's good. It's efficient.
That happens in the hunt scene. I don't know if we want to move on to that yet, but it's my favorite example of it when the apes appear on those horses, and the music kind of stops, but you hear the horn that they're the hunt horn that's blowing. And it's that perfect mix of like, is it the sound design or is it the score or is it both? I feel like that whole, like, I was just fascinated by the sound for the first 45 minutes of this movie. I just, for some reason, couldn't get over it.
The fact that it got nominated for Best Original Score is I think, awesome. Like it is, because it's such a strange score too, and it's very smart, in how it's deployed. Which we'll get to the end later when we get to the end. But it's my favorite part of the ending too. Like there's no score on the end. It's just you hear the waves lapping all the way through the credits, which just to not use a score in that moment. We're so trained to when something bum, bum, bum. We're trained to expect that. And if we get that, then we kind of reset and we say, okay, I just watched that. And but like this movie, there's no closure to this movie at all, because it's just waves coming up and you hear the ocean, and you just kind of have to sit with that feeling of the last shot for way longer than is comfortable or than we usually get to, So like the fact that it was nominated for Best Original Score and the most iconic moment in the entire movie has none is, it's great.
Well, again, that's what's so like surprising to me about this movie is I always respect restraint in sound design. And I think we, again, talked about it a little bit with the Truman Show episode. There are moments where Truman's realizing and you could have like a moment, but like It doesn't. You just kind of have to live with it. And I feel like it's so not odd, but like it's just so admirable to me that the most oppressive this sound design gets is in that first 20 minutes before you've gotten to any of the action. And then once we get to the action, it reels it in. It's fascinating. I want to like discuss it in a music theory or sound theory class. It's really well done.
But yeah, on the hunt, like the hunt also is, I feel like the just the choreography or like the physicality of how you feel like you totally know what's happening. Like you understand everything from like, there's a moment where I think it's Heston is running and he outsmarts the apes, but he jumps over a stump, which catches their net. And so he's able to keep going. And then when they get to the cliff and like the humans are, the primitive humans are kind of falling off one at a time, and he winds up falling, but he gets shot. But like, it's like there's the way the director shoots all this stuff. It's like you really feel like you have a good sense of where everything is and what's happening, you know. And this is just a bunch of stuntmen in a field ultimately, you know. Like
well, you know, it's clumsy in a lot of ways, but because everybody. I don't know how many stuntmen there were. Like, it feels like it was back in the days where you could just like hire extras for nothing and be like, look, jump off that cliff into that water. I'll find somebody else will do it.
Yeah, I think so.
But everything's just a little bit clumsy, but you know, it looks more legit in that sense, like, because they were people just falling down hills and stuff. But like,
there is a moment where you can see like Heston like duck to not like hit the camera. And I was like, oh.
yeah, that's
no, but again, like this movie it was not an expensive movie. And, you know, they shot all this up in like Malibu or wherever the Fox Ranch is or something like that. But they were just out running and gunning for the most part. Like, they would set stuff up, and there's not many sets. Like the village is a proper set, and, you know, some of the interiors and everything. But like this stuff in the, you know, it's very well choreographed and executed, Scott, for all the reasons that you're talking about in terms of like the sense of the space and the sense of action and who's the opposing forces and what their plans are and all that stuff. There's no threads to pull on in this sequence. Like, it's executed really, really cleanly. But it is just a bunch of people running through corn.
Pretty much, yeah. And they kind of, I was just going to say they kind of ape it. And so now I will say,
no, please do. Listen, I described the sequels as bananas earlier, and I'm not going to do that again.
Guys, stop monkeying around.
I didn't mean to.
We're at work.
And also, of course, this is the scene where you finally see the apes for the first time, like you said, when the gorillas are revealed, and yeah, they're pretty freaking scary in that moment.
Well, especially because the way that they're revealed is like the first thing that you see is them like chopping at the corn. Like, you can't see who's coming. Right. You just can see that something is coming, and everybody's scared of it, which is textbook reveal stuff. Like, there's a couple of moments in here, and even again at the end, like there are things that are worth studying in this movie in terms of like the nuts and bolts and like how to cut a sequence and how to reveal bad guys and all of that stuff. Like, it's very by the numbers in a good way.
Well, it's also where you learn that the humans are mute. It's very strange to watch this scene and hear no one screaming.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't think about that, but yeah.
And it's the first hint of the deep love affair that will occur between Taylor and Nova. They see
oh
each
my
other.
God.
While she's
don't get me started on Taylor and Nova.
No, we can. Let's go ahead and get started on that.
I think the Nova thing is it's weird, right? Because it doesn't feel like Nova has much say in any of this, right? She's kind of along for the ride.
Not a ton of agency with Nova.
Yeah.
That's my big issue with her whole character. And if it weren't for Zira, who I love, I think Zira is a very compelling character. I would say this movie sucks to women between the opening bridging and Nova. Yeah. But thank goodness this movie does have Zira, who I think is an extremely compelling
Zira's
character.
Great.
So, yeah.
And even in the late 60s, like the making, it could have just as easily been Cornelius is the one that is like really making the effort. But the fact that it's Zira it feels more right than Cornelius, the one that's trying to reach out and make sure that, you know, Bright Eyes is taken care of or whatever. But
yeah. I mean, it's more zero, right? I mean, Cornelius is second. I'm not gonna say second monkey, second fiddle to.
I don't think that's a real phrase.
No, second monkey is not. You were thinking of second banana.
Sorry, second banana. I was trying so hard to avoid that. Yeah, because in the sequel they actually Cornelius and Zira are in the sequel briefly. They're not a big part of the second movie, but they recast Roddy McDowall. He wasn't available for some reason, but it was kind of like, well, he's not in it that much. And really, it's Zira. The Zira Taylor relationship is the important one. Cornelius is more along for the ride, sort of. She's great, Kim Hunter. I mean, she's
very good.
So awesome.
I do like that scene where she's. It's a fascinating watch this scene where she's like, "I got you a present," and it's Nova, and but the way that they have reduced humans to animals is the point, right? I mean, that's like the entire point of the movie. But to just be like, here, I got you a present, and then later it's like, oh yeah, no, Zero wants them to mate, and all of this before they're gonna go neuter Taylor. It's an interesting dynamic, and I feel like it works with the whole point of the movie. It starts to get a little fuzzier when like a legitimate romance starts to blossom, and then just like, hey, Taylor, cool it, man, like this.
Well,
right, yeah.
Oh my God, when he goes on the whole rant about what they were gonna do to, God, what's her name, the woman who died in the spaceship, and I was like,
Stuart.
I don't.
Oh yeah, like, she was gonna be our Eve. It's like, what?
I already didn't like you, brother.
Out,
I already didn't like you. Reel it in a little bit.
Well, his whole spiel about like there was lots of love making, but not much love, and it's like, are we supposed to feel bad for you right now? Like,
I was like,
are you?
What's the implication here? My God,
don't know what point.
It's like now I'm
making.
kind of glad you're going through.
Yeah,
this.
No, go ahead, and take his nuts. Okay? Like it's fine.
That was one of the scenes I wanted to talk about was the whole scene that kind of leads up to her being like, here, we found you a gift, a woman. Because I do think that's where it kind of starts to set in that like humans are just animals. Like I do the same thing to my dog. I say like, look, I found you a boyfriend. But it's also where you start to really learn how stupid Taylor is, because one thing that really ticked me off earlier was when he was trying, like Zira starts to click with her that he's special. And she's trying to show Cornelius and a little later Zaius, and he like beckons her closer, and instead of just like trying to, I don't know, mouth that he can talk if he hadn't been shot in the throat, he grabs her. It's like, they already think you're an animal. Like, why are you acting like an animal?
Yeah, it's lucky they didn't
I also
shoot him,
think that,
right?
Yeah. Well, and I also think that part of the point is that we are. Like that's part of what makes Zaius right, from his perspective, and part of what makes Zaius and Taylor. Honestly, they would be buds if they would allow it. I feel like they're similar enough. Part of that whole thing is that he does have these base instincts, and like so we all do, and that's how we ruin the whole planet. Is kind of the point of the movie. Depending on how much credit you want to give a movie, which is our favorite thing to say on the show, like they either nailed it. They did it exactly right, or like they got lucky, and we're just kind of reading into it in a more favorable way because we like the movie. But
no, I think you can give it some credit. Like I think that is part of the thesis of the movie. Like it's humans and their hubris and it's what led to their downfall. And yeah, I think you see that here.
So, and I think something you said a minute ago, which really struck me, Clint, which is basically Zaius and Taylor, if not for the fact that they were from different time periods and different species, they would be in the same club together, right? They would be in the same country club, kicking their feet up, smoking cigars together, right? I mean, they're
talking about what's to be done about these beatniks.
Where is your nest, Taylor? Where are your women?
Thank you. Thank you for calling me Taylor.
Is there anything we need to talk about in terms of how they pulled off the "take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape" scene?
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Because that's like, outside of that being one of the most iconic lines of all time, it's a long sequence. It's like 6 minutes of him trying to escape. And then just like running around, and he does run through the museum. And that's where he finds it's Dodge is the other guy.
I think so, yeah.
He crashes a funeral as well.
A funeral, yeah. He wanders through a funeral. Ends up at a museum where he sees his buddy like taxidermied, which again, like Alex, for you watching this as a horror movie, like that's spooky.
Oh, it's so
horrifying.
spooky. It freaks me. It was like a jump scare for me.
I think also that it is a long sequence and it has different different modes to it, right? Like it gets the scene where he's walking through the funeral in the museum, Goldsmith's score sort of changes and it becomes this sort of more of a pulsating thing where he's sneaking around. Then it's the hijinks when he's outside and he's jumping and the camera's under him and
it turns into like a rooftop chase from the French Connection or something.
But I think it also serves a purpose to give us add some color to the ape society in a bit. Like we get a chance to see outside of Zira's lab and right and outside of the the kennel where they keep the humans. It's like, oh, you see, they have museums, they have funerals, they're in the market like shopping for vegetables and stuff like that. So I think it serves a couple of different purposes, which is interesting.
I think budget mileage feels like it might have been part of it too. It's like they built this little village and at some point they realized that they'd only seen it once. So it's just like, all right, quick, run through it. Like that might have had something to do with it too. But no, it is a nice little moment to get outside.
And he finally can speak.
Yeah, and when he does, and he makes it count.
He does.
That was the first thing that he said.
They put that thing around his neck. It's like he just got shot. He's just healing. Don't put that thing around his.
That's what I was thinking the whole time. I was like, oh my god, he's got like a fresh.
We know
he's there.
He's a jerk, but he doesn't deserve that.
I know. But for me, this sequence being so long too, like this combined with the tribunal, to me it just kind of builds up to this, again, horrific, because I chose to watch this movie this way, this horrific kind of realization that like there's no getting out. Like no one's going to help him. Like, I mean, Zira and Cornelius are trying, but the odds are stacked against him. The other reason I think the get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes moment is so good is because it zooms in on Zira's face. And it's like one of my favorite moments of the movie, because even through the prosthetics, you can see this kind of like realization and excitement and this kind of like, I got like a, that's my boy, you tell him, like from it. And it's like, it's such a good moment. Again, even through the prosthetics, I was really stunned about how many emotions you were able to see in that moment.
Yeah, those prosthetics are something else, right? I mean, I think the whole thing was with them is that it's not just a mask, but it's pieces, so they can still emote to some degree. I think that was part of what made it work so well. I mean, Chambers deserved that Oscar, and you're right. Like, yeah, you're right about Kim Hunter in that moment. It's great. She's
great.
It's a great
little Hunter, moment. I love Zira. She's the best.
Yeah. You gotta. I'm sorry to keep saying this, but you have to watch the second sequel, Alex.
No, I'm gonna. I'm locked in
watch
now.
them all. They're and honestly, like you can kind of have them on in the background too, but it's. They're
my
incredible.
dog's not gonna like it, but we're on the journey now.
No, I think you'll probably be okay in this if I remember right, because again, like the sequels are just kind of the sequels are different. But then when we get into the tribunal, this this is when we start to get more. And if you look at the escape attempt as a way to sort of flesh out the apes society a little bit more, the tribunal is one too, right? Because then we get to see their legal system sort of at work, and just with how like brazenly unjust the situation is. With like they won't even let him talk, and like the guy in the middle, the president or whatever, won't even tell him to be quiet. He tells somebody else to tell him to be quiet, and like it's little bits like that are again playing to the hopelessness of this situation. Like if like we're gonna geld him, got him to try and escape, and then it's we won't even let you talk at your trial. Is the last straw, I guess. Like there's an escalating sense of there's no way out of this. That this sort of sham trial is, another. And again, like going back to the writer and his experience testifying at the House Un-American Activities Committee, like this is that has to flavor this sequence in a way that in 1968 was just right in the rearview mirror.
They don't even let him wear clothes during the tribunal, right? They
they make him
take his clothes off because they smell.
You're right, because the classic hero would escape ultimately, would win, would probably defeat the apes even, right? Like by the end somehow. And this, like, it is all pointing to no escape, like, which was, this is very much like a late 60s thing that was then would bleed into the 70s. Like all those Heston sci-fi movies we mentioned earlier, like he never gets out of it. He never gets a happy ending in any of them. And that wasn't just him. That's like sort of the genre of the era. And it's obviously, we could get into it, but it's like a reflection of the state of the times, right? There was so much, there was this sense of loss of faith in our institutions and all this jazz and social upheaval and all the rest of it that is clearly playing out here. And I have to say, like, I always thought, because Heston, he's getting on in years at this point. Like, he's not a new person in Hollywood. And I always thought it was interesting that he was willing to kind of take a chance, because I have to imagine this was a risky project to take on, to do this crazy movie with these weird monkeys. And, he plays, like we said, he plays kind of a jerk, and he did it. And so credit to him. I mean, there's a lot you could delve into Charlton Heston's whole career and where he wound up and what his whole deal was. But I feel like he had some balls to him at this time. He's like, I'm going to do this weird apes movie. And it paid off for him, obviously.
And you can kind of see him in this scene.
Boo! No, but like that's a good point though, because like it is a wild, like that's something that I kept thinking while watching it. I was like, this movie is wild, and it's not because it's old at this point. Like this, I know this movie was wild when it came out in 1968.
Yeah.
As a genre, and we can talk about this. We consistently talk about the conversation of like sci-fi being taken seriously and how many sci-fi or fantasy movies get nominated for Best Picture, and they're few and far between and things like that. For a guy like Charlton Heston, like I wonder if it's not, the way that it made sense for Keanu Reeves to be John Wick at kind of a lull in his career. If this was kind of his like, yeah, I'll try whatever. And it's like, there's a scene where I'm on trial naked and it's a bunch of apes. Like, I've had that dream before. Sure. Like, whatever. I'll do it. Who knows why? But yeah, I think that's another interesting part of the context of this movie that I feel like, again, gets lost, watching it now, because I think now you think about, it's like, well, Charlton Heston movies, it's like, yeah, there's Planet of the Apes and the rest, and so for him at the time to take a risk on doing this, like, yeah, it had to have been a decision, at least.
The other thing I like about the tribunal scene is like it's kind of the capstone for this no escape like idea for Taylor, but I think it's where it also starts occurring to Zira and Cornelius, because you see this kind of, like I was saying, this almost kind of like hope with Zira where she's thinking, oh, he can talk now, everyone's gonna change their minds, and you can kind of see it dawn on her during this scene that like, oh, it was never gonna work out. And you can kind of see like Cornelius getting like forced to kind of get off the sidelines a little bit. It's a really just the whole scene is very fascinating character-wise in a way that I enjoyed.
Yeah, Cornelius, I think in this scene is really interesting. Like, you can tell that he's an archaeologist, he's passionate, he wants to, literally uncovering truth about the past is his job, right? Like in a very literal get dirt off of the past way as an archaeologist. And he's passionate about it, obviously, because he's done things that have gotten him in trouble in the past. But he's also so like willing to just like, sorry, sir, yes, sir, and then just kind of back down from things in a really interesting and charismatic's not quite the right word, but like I like the guy, like,
oh yeah, like he's unthreatening, I would say.
Yes, he's very non-threatening, and but I like he's a great, and particularly with him and Zira as a couple, like I love it.
Well, that's what I thought. That was an interesting choice in the scene too, because Taylor gives the note to Cornelius instead of giving it to Zira, again, kind of forcing him to. We shouldn't keep using, but like kind of forcing him to grow some balls and get off the sidelines.
Sure.
Go stand up for what you believe in, and even then he's kind of like, oh, Like, and but
Yeah,
like
he
if
still
he
has a hard
handed the
time
note to
doing it.
Zira just would have like kind of done what she's been doing the whole movie. So it was an interesting choice, I feel.
It was Cornelius's turn to have a little character beat.
But I mean, Zero is the one who gets him into these situations, also, right? Like he would just
Yeah, but
be-
he doesn't mind. Deep down, he doesn't mind. He
No,
likes
I
it.
think he digs it. I think he digs it.
needs it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's happy to have that
He
energy
knows he
in his
needs
life
it.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, he'd do anything for Zero. Can't blame
I mean,
him.
who among us?
But once we get past this tribunal scene, then we get the other really great scene that's a lot of this sort of thematic dump kind of work, which is between Taylor and Zaius, like in his office one-on-one at night, where they both. What I love about this scene, and it's a scene that really makes me love Dr. Zaius as a character. Like Taylor is who he is from the start, and he's going through it, and you're watching him struggle, and you get it, right? But then like this scene where Dr. Zaius kind of puts his cards on the table, I think is incredible. This is one of those scenes where you're like, you guys, if you guys would just admit it, you would be buddies. Like they're coming from the same place. They really are.
In that moment where he calls him Taylor instead of Bright Eyes, like what I think is really cool too about this scene is it's like the movie really holds its cards to his chest when it comes to the Zaius character until this scene. And now you get all those realizations that like, oh, he's just scared. However misguided he's in the way he's going about it. He's trying to protect his people. It's a really nice little reveal, and just like I really like this scene.
I was just going to say the really frightening thing about it too is I believe this is the reason why Zaius is willing to open up to Taylor here is because he knows he's going to lobotomize him, right? Isn't it? Don't we find out shortly after?
Yeah,
that?
he says
Well, that's
at
the
the
threat,
beginning
right?
of this
He's
scene.
like,
yeah.
It's one of those scenes where the guy's like, you can confess and tell me what I want to hear, and we'll make a public deal out of it, and you'll be fine. Just play along, and I won't lobotomize you. But if you're just going to continue to say that you flew here on a spaceship, like I'm taking your brain and your nuts, like
Right.
which is
Right.
again, like that's all part of the cards on the table thing for Zaius, I think, in this scene. But the other thing that I think this is really important about this scene in this particular place in the movie is that it sets up the end and where the two of them leave their dynamic, like, with Taylor riding away on the beach, or he's got Zaius tied up, on the beach. It sets up that scene to where, like, in everything that, he's afraid of, that Dr. Zaius is afraid of, that he hasn't really admitted to yet. Like, he's being honest about his motives here, but he is not honest about like what's underneath the motives or what's behind them. And we don't get that until the end, which is again that like, scroll 26 passage, verse 7 or whatever it is that he reads that sounds a lot like Taylor's log entry from the very beginning of the movie. Like that's what's motivating him. It's the same thing that is motivating Taylor in a lot of ways to get out of there. His whole speech about there's just got to be something better than humanity out there, and we're gonna find it. Like that whole thing. But this scene where Zaius, parts the curtain a little bit and shows who he really is, it really sets up that it sets us up to hear what Zaius believes later. And so it's like. This scene is great because it's doing two things. Like it's letting us into Zaius on a deeper level. It's sort of like peeling back one of his layers, but it's also holding something back too. Like it's also still, it's very specifically holding back. What are you afraid of? And it's like,
right.
that's the reveal that we get at the end. It walks right up to that moment of like, here's the thing we're going to reveal later, but just stay tuned is kind of what the scene does in a narrative function, which I think is, again, the script is something else. Like it's really good.
Yeah, it's real tight. Also, how uncomfortable does Heston look with his arms tied behind his back like that? Like that must have hurt shooting all day.
Yeah,
right?
there's no way to fake that either. Like he's just straight up in a torture device. Like it can't be.
Looks like
he might be holding on to it to where he could just let go and stretch his arms at will or something like that. But still, no, he looks awful.
And Heston's really playing it up too. Like you can kind of see his like muscles straining, and he just looks uncomfortable and crazy.
Well, I'm telling you, that's Heston's whole thing, right? Like his like I'm struggling. Like that's nobody's ever done it better than Charlton Heston.
He's really good at struggling. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Harrison Ford would also go on to be able to do it, but in a fun way, where it's like, oh, it's Harris, Indy's getting the shit kicked out of him again, but it looks kind of fun. But Heston, he's just suffering. It's not fun. There's nothing fun about it.
Yeah.
Where are you taking her?
As I understand it, the end is largely the only thing of the script left of Rod Serling's draft. The Statue of Liberty. I hate to blow a torf if I'm doing
No,
that.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
But it's apparently that's mostly what's left. I found a quote from Serling that was like, yeah, it's all wasn't it Michael Wilson? It's all Michael Wilson's script than in his mind. And because the ending was still very much Rod Serling's and it's such a big part of the movie, Michael Wilson didn't want to arbitrate it or anything. He was like, yeah, I'll share the credit. It's fine. Because that ending is so big and iconic and important. And he knew that at the time, that he was just like, yeah, no, it's fine. It's both of us. Put both of our names on there, please. Even though apparently he wrote like 90% of the rest of it. So, or rewrote.
That's so wild, because I feel like people do think of it as a Rod Serling movie because of the twist.
Yeah,
It's a very Twilight Zone twist.
I mean, because it's based on a book, right? So there's certain broad strokes which are probably in both versions. A few years ago they released a graphic novel version of Serling's script. It's a comic book, but it's Serling's script, and I read it, and it's all the stuff you were talking about, Alex, where it's like set in like modern times. Well, it's the 1960s, but there's apes driving cars, and there's airplanes and helicopters and stuff,
I love me some retrofuturism.
Yeah. So
what people thought the future was going to look like in 1950 is my favorite aesthetic.
Yes, exactly. It is a lot different than the Michael Wilson version. I also know that there had been debate in later years about who even came up with the Statue of Liberty. Like Serling wrote it, but like the couple of the producers were trying to claim that maybe one of them came up with the idea. So it's one of those things that I think is lost to history. It feels, I mean, like we said, it feels very Serling though. Right?
It also probably they came up with it in a room, and there's like 7 of them sitting around, and they're all like, that was my idea. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But again, like we talked about it a little bit with the reveal the first time that we see the apes, but this is the way that they reveal the Statue of Liberty, and they just kind of hint at it. And you see the torch, you see past the torch looking down, you see past the crown, and it starts to dawn on you while you're watching it, just as slowly as it's dawning on Taylor down there in the surf. It's such a good slow play reveal. Like you just kind of have to stew in it the same way that he is. It's like, and even before Nova looks back up and we get like that last shot of the action of the thing before we see it in its totality. Even we see it from her perspective, she's still not really understanding what it is, right? Like we don't look back up at it until she looks back up at it, which I think is a really interesting edit choice. But then like there's no real acceptance of it that we get to kind of participate in, particularly because again, like the music doesn't come up. There's no like dun, 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 like in any other version of this. Like there's got to be some big dramatic score. There's some note somewhere somebody was like, I mean, where's the music? I need more music. Give me loud brass right here. Like that's probably a note that they had to push back against at some point. But just like how slowly it reveals the Statue of Liberty, and like you can recognize the torch and you can recognize the crown and it can dawn on you, but we don't get to see it until later, which is fascinating.
I mean, just to back up a second, like the whole ending is so different from what we would get now, right? But nowadays, but it's like there's no action scene or anything. Like Taylor has, he shoots his gun a couple of times, and that's sort of it. It's all the speechifying from Dr. Zayas and Taylor. That's the climax, right? And then coming into this, it's just like, I don't know that like this kind of a finale even happens anymore, right?
It might. I'm trying to think of an example of one, but like
I was,
don't know.
you know what, my mind.
It's just ballsy to end on such a down note.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like movies today, there's like, you're watching it and there's like 4 times it could end. Like you have the big
Yes.
reveal and then there's like 4 more minutes where they like catch up to it. No, I think it is kind of unique to just have the reveal credits. It's very jarring.
Yeah, it really is. Just hearing, I think you hear the waves as after it's faded to black.
No,
you
there's
still hear the
no.
waves.
It's over the entire credit. Which, by the way, there's like 11 seconds worth of credits, which is kind of a fun thing. It's like there's so few credits back in those days.
Also, Cornelius and Zira, their story doesn't end so hot either, right? I mean, Zaius blows up the cave, so any of Cornelius's scientific findings are lost. And I think he says, does he say he's going to have
They're
them
going to
arrested
be
or
tried for heresy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not really fair.
No,
No one's really winning
it's a
here.
drag.
It sucks.
I do appreciate a movie that doesn't end with any sort of finality, like the sense that life continues to happen for the characters on screen. Like there's nothing wrapped up in a bow here, even a little bit. Like they're all going to be stuck in this situation for the foreseeable future. Which is a thing I feel like Scorsese does that a lot. Like you think about the end of Goodfellas and how it's just like, you're stuck in this purgatory now. I do like a movie that does that. And I feel like it's a rare thing. And it might be just as rare today as it was in the 60s. Like I honestly don't know, but it's a great way to end it. I'm telling you, just no music, just waves crashing all into the credits. Like the language of cinema dictates that we stand up and leave right now. And because the movie's over, but like there's a moment of what am I supposed to do? Like I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with myself, because it just kind of drifts into the credits, which it's such a great choice to not start any music and to just let us stew in that whole thing. On top of the how skillfully the Statue of Liberty was revealed, with like slow playing that and like. It's dawning on us and as the same time as it's dawning on Taylor, because we're getting these little hints, and like he's refusing to believe it for a little while, so we don't get to believe it either, and then we don't get to see it until Nova looks back up at it and she doesn't really understand it either, so you don't really get, and then it just sort of drifts under the credits, so you never really get a full picture of what's happened. It's just like this, there's no closure, there's no any of it, and you just kind of like like
It doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel uneasy.
It is the quiet version of the nails on a chalkboard that the opening 15 minutes is, right? Like it's just unease.
Do you guys recall the episode of Mad Men where Don Draper goes to see Planet of the Apes? Like, it's 1968. And he takes his kid, I think, to see it. I think he takes his kid to see it. And you just see him sitting there smoking a cigarette as the final scene happens, and then it's exactly what you're saying, Clint. Like the credits have rolled, and he's still kind of sitting there, just like thinking about it. And the kid's like, "What?" You're like, "What? What is it?" And he's like, "He was on Earth the whole time." Something like that. It's like it perfectly encapsulates what you're describing.
It
the
was
Statue
Earth
of Liberty
all along.
it's a matte painting, I guess, right? But I think it looks really good even now.
It's
like
a couple of
effects.
things, right? Like I think they had a miniature that they shot from, it's like a half scale something or other that they shot
from behind, right?
On top from behind, and then the frontal shot is a matte painting for sure.
But it looks great. I think it looks great.
No, it looks great.
I think so.
It scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, too. I can tell you that much.
This is also one of the few times I like where how Nova is used, too. Because you kind of talked about it, Clint, where you just kind of have to watch her expression while watching Taylor lose his mind, and she has no idea what's happening. That's also horrifying in its own right. Like, she's only seen this man try to, get out, and you just see him crumble. I really like how she just kind of reacts to that in that scene.
And she's also having to had to come to terms with the fact that he shaved his beard off as well, which must be
super weird.
Just a 1-2 punch there.
Yeah, he also didn't let her go home. She was like, "That's my home. That's where I'm from. I want to go back." And he's like, "No, you were given to me."
This guy sucks. This guy sucks.
I don't know. It was probably dangerous. She wouldn't have lasted. She would have gotten lobotomized or something. As soon as Zaius found her, I think. But I think we talked about this when we chose Planet of the Apes, which, by the way, Scott, this was a replacement for one of my favorite movies of all time, OSS 117, Cairo Nest of Spies. Alex was kind enough to promptly give that movie the boot so that we could talk about Planet of the Apes instead.
Okay.
But one of the things that we talked about when we were deciding which one to replace it with was like, is there much more iconic than this Statue of Liberty ending and get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape, and you blew it up, damn you all to hell. Like, it's some of the most iconic stuff that's ever been on film, right? Like,
Yeah. It's like, it's in the real, like when the Hollywood reel, like let's do the greatest hits of the cinema of the 20th century. Like in 2 minutes, it's like, this is going to be in that, right? Like that Statue of Liberty shot or the,
it's Ruby Slippers and it's the Statue of Liberty shot and
Death Star blowing up, you know,
Death Star blowing up. Yeah. And the shark coming up in Jaws.
From Jaws 4.
Correct. The 3D one, Jaws 3.
I love this trailer for movies that we're making.
The trailer for movies. Nicole Kidman is sitting there watching it going like,
Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
let's do movie lists. So we did a couple of things you didn't know about Planet of the Apes through the whole run of the Circus trilogy. So we've had some of those. It was a pick in top 10 makeup transformations of all time. Pretty obviously. Top 10 sci-fi films of all time. It was on that list as well. A pick, not just an honorable mention. And like I said before, it was the thumbnail of the top 10 best movie twists of all time. So, which that's, I don't think we realized until we were making the thumbnail what a dangerous video we were making. But that made the thumbnail. So it also showed up in the 100 most iconic lines of all time. The "Take your stinking paws off me" was in that. And then when we did 100 more of the most iconic lines of all time, that's where the "Damn you all to hell" showed up in that one. Which I was rewatching that, and the line that comes next, "I've had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane," are the two back to back in the edit, which I think is just. That's why I like working on this channel. And then the Statue of Liberty shot ended up on the 100 most iconic shots of all time. So just like we were talking about, like you can't talk about the history of cinema without talking about this movie in a really significant way. So do we need to invent a new movie list to put Planet of the Apes on, or is it well covered?
It's pretty well covered. Like I was trying to think of lists it would be on.
I've said this a couple of times. Like if there's I don't know that we need to, highlight Planet of the Apes anymore. Like you can't say how iconic this movie is that you can't even make a trailer for movies without including at least 3 shots from this movie, and then also be like, well, we need to talk about it more. So saying that at the end of an hour and a half worth of us talking about it. But
I was gonna say, isn't that the reason why you have to keep talking about it? Because
it's easy to talk about. Like it's and I haven't watched this movie in not sat down and properly watched it in a long time. And it's better than I remember. I don't remember when the last time I watched it was, but
I had a damn good time rewatching. Like I said, the last time I rewatched it was when I watched it for the first time in college, and going like 10 years since then watching it. I was enjoying myself. My dog wasn't, but I was.
Let's torf. I wonder if Tayo wrote these torfs before he knew that we were having a Planet of the Apes expert on.
That's my concern. I don't know if we're going to be able to trip up Scott. Scott, by the way, this is true or false. We call it torf because Dan made a mistake once, and we bring it up every episode now.
I had stickers made. It's great.
I was wondering. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just true or false, but we call it torf.
Okay.
He was trying to tell us from off camera to refer to it as true or false, and he wrote T or F on a whiteboard and just kind of like shoved it at us. And I was like, "Does that say torf? Why are you writing torf at us?"
We were
I was trying to. I was like, "What is it?" I was assuming it was trivia, and I was trying to figure out how you got from torf to.
That's how we go.
No.
It's because
torf.
It's because we'll never forgive Dan.
Yeah.
Well, don't overestimate my memory, because there's a good chance I might have known something and have forgotten it in my old age too.
I'm cutting around that excuse too.
Okay, Torf number 1. During breaks in filming, actors that were made up as different ape species tended to hang out together. So gorillas with gorillas, gargantuans with gargantuans, chimps with chimps. True or false?
Or orangutans?
Oh my God, what did I say?
you said organtuans.
It sounds like a Godzilla. I think
yeah,
Godzilla
that-
might have fought.
That was also made in 1968. Godzilla versus Organtuan.
I have a cold. Leave you Gargantuan? Who said?
Love it. I thought about not correcting you, but I couldn't let it slide.
No,
you know what? That's true, and I'm gonna go true in like a Stanford prison experiment sort of reason. Like I bet people gravitated like toward their own or whatever, and it was honestly a little bit weird.
Yeah, true.
Are you saying that because it sounds right, or is because you already know it?
Well, I know it. It's in the like DVD that was on the documentary. The documentary
Sure.
that was on the DVD or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Unless it's an urban legend that is passed down.
we did have one of those. I think
Yeah.
like the Truman Show episode we had like
No, it was the Dark Knight one. It was the
Dark Knight,
myth
yeah.
about Heath Ledger improving the bomb thing.
But this is not an urban legend. This is true, as Scott knows. Yeah, Charlton Heston has a quote. There'd be some kind of self-segregation. The gorillas would eat at one table, the chimpanzees at another, the orangutans at another.
You got it.
I got it.
I'm gonna see it. This is one of those moments where I wish the art team had a bunch of extra time, and I could be like, "Hey, can you just really quick drop a movie poster for a 1968 film called Godzilla versus Organtuan?"
I think
Why did I
the
say
I feel like
Organtuan?
Organtuan would that feels like a portmanteau of organic and gargantuan, right? So
I
it's
think
like
I really
a giant
was.
flower monster, maybe, or something like that.
The way I will excuse it for myself is I think I was in a sci-fi mindset. So
That's
I
no, it's
was
fine, it's
maybe
great. I love
thinking of some weird Godzilla kaiju creature.
It gave us this whole great runner. Like there's nothing wrong at all.
No,
here.
it's
This is wonderful.
I regret nothing. Okay, Torf number 2. Planet of the Apes was filmed almost entirely on location in the Arizona desert.
The first half was. I think the second half, I think they filmed mostly in like Malibu.
Yeah, so I don't know I'm not sure that you can say mostly. It's like all the stuff from the crash sequence when.
Welcome to
Taylor-
Torf, Scott.
Okay.
We are trying
is,
to trick you.
Basically, if Taylor.
Quite frequently, there are half truths and there are fibs and
Okay.
there are
Okay. If Taylor is giving Landon shit, reminding him that all his family members are long dead, that's in Arizona.
If Landon's brain is still intact, that was in Arizona. Everything you ever loved is dust.
So I don't think half. I don't think you could say half.
So you're both going false? We got you on one. That's true.
Oh, come on.
I'm very proud of me and Tayo. Mostly Tayo because I didn't write these.
I think this is a Heath Ledger moment.
I think it is. No, I think
What
that's
is
what
it?
it is.
Was it
I
New
think it's
Mexico, not Arizona? What part of the Colorado River were they on?
No, it was in the middle of summer with temperatures exceeding 100 degrees. The extreme heat made the costumes and heavy makeup even more excruciating to wear. No, it's just mostly in Arizona.
I don't think that's right.
I
but I don't
can
want to
correct us if we're wrong.
Okay. I mean, I know the ending was filmed in like Leo Carrillo State Beach up there in Malibu or someplace like near.
Oh.
I know that's where they filmed it because we shot a spoof for it for Comedy Central years ago.
Oh, that's funny.
And we went to more or less the same spot.
We've got a live update from Tayo. Beach scenes were in Zuma Beach, Malibu. That's why we say in almost entirely.
Listen. Just in the comments, let us know whose side you're on. Are you guys on Go Team Torf, or do you want to, or do you think Scott and I are
Tayo's
more accurate?
Tayo's live update is I did say almost. So
Okay.
let's have that for the record.
If I get one of these torfs wrong, you have to understand what it's doing to myself, my sense of self.
I'm just gonna almost never trust you again. I think is
That's the point of Torf.
it's the whole point of Torf. That's where we're at. All right, I love it. Moving on.
Okay, Torf number 3. Franklin J. Schaffner wore a gorilla mask at times while directing to Better Get in Touch with the Movie. True or false?
Now, I know Paul Verhoeven directed the shower scene from Starship Troopers naked, but I don't know if Schaffner directed.
Well, there goes the
Supposedly,
tour
yeah.
for the Starship Trooper episode.
Listen, we should be so lucky to talk about Starship Troopers. I'm gonna go false. I'm gonna say false.
Yeah, I actually have never heard that before, but I'm gonna say false also.
It is false.
Okay, 'cause it just doesn't feel like a method thing from the '60s, right? Like that feels more like a more modern version of things.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
Based on
someone
Alex's
did
face,
wear-
I'm wrong.
Someone did wear a gorilla mask at times, and it was Jerry Goldsmith.
Oh, the composer. Interesting.
And he also used a ram's horn in the process. So that's one of those tricky torfs where there's a little bit of truth in there. All right, I've got one more.
I'm gonna do the math on what percentage of the movie takes place in the
Listen, we said
and whether
almost.
or not that
said
counts
almost.
as almost. What counts as almost? 70%? 80%?
I'm a guest here, so I'm not going to argue the point.
No. This is like having Thanksgiving dinner with somebody else's family and it being that's what you're doing right now.
Really not at the top of our torf game. All right, one more. Like me during this episode, Charlton Heston was sick with the flu during much of filming. True or false?
Ooh. Much of filming?
Much of filming, yes.
Much of filming. I'm gonna go true. The narrative I'm crafting around this is that he was sick and miserable, and that's partly why Taylor's such a jerk. Because Heston was taking a flyer on this weird pulpy B movie thing, and then he was hot and sick and mad, and so that's why Taylor is who he is. I'd like that to be the case.
Yeah, I think that is true. I mean, I guess I won't quibble with most of or almost all, but I do think he was. I think I remember hearing that he was sick while shooting it. So I'll say true also.
My other guess is false. It was Maurice Evans, and his nose was running into his makeup constantly, and it was a real problem.
No, that's true. Rather than wait for him to get better, the producers felt that his hoarse voice added something to the character of Taylor. So you're actually kind of right, Clint.
There you go.
According to Heston's diary, after filming the scene where Taylor and Nova are forcibly separated, he wrote that he was feeling like hell while shooting because of his illness and felt even worse every time that damn fire hose hit me, which is pretty rough.
Yep.
No wonder he was sick.
I know that. Imagine you're sick and you just keep getting hit with a hose.
You keep getting hit with a hose, like a prop hose too. Like I can't imagine there was. He does spend a lot of this movie wet, by the way.
But you hear the hoarseness. It really does, like, especially during his first, not his first line in the movie, but his first line when he can talk. That like, you dirty damn, like you can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, he took a bullet to the vocal cords. So
that's torf.
Right. I feel like we lost that one, Scott.
Yeah.
I can't really put my finger on why exactly.
I feel like everyone lost. I don't know.
Not many of us won. Yeah, Tayo won, I think.
Tayo won.
Yeah. Well, let's transition straight from that into who is winning your MVP. Who's the MVP of the movie for you guys?
I really struggled with this one, honestly. Scott, you go first. I want to hear your answer.
I have to go with Charlton Heston. I mean,
Chuck,
because I know you guys hate Taylor, like hate him with a passion, but I actually love I love Taylor, despite the fact that he's such an asshole, or maybe because he is. I'm not sure.
Share a certain curmudgeonly energy with him.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor made me the man I am today. You know,
every one Monday and Tuesday a year for your entire childhood.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Every September, ABC Movie of the Week. I have to go with Heston, because I also think that I don't think the movie gets made without Heston to some degree. Like, I think he helped get the thing made.
Yeah.
I think him and Franklin Schaffner had a prior relationship, so there was a certain, like, Schaffner wanted Heston for some reason as well. He thought he was right for the part, and I just love this. I love this period, this Charlton Heston period of Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Omega Man, and Soylent Green. It's like this like golden age of like really depressing science fiction.
Really pulpy and dark sci-fi. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
like
cool.
bad, like Yeah, and it started with this one and with him, So that's kind of my thing. I mean, I really wanted to go with Zira, Kim Hunter, but I think I have to say Taylor. What about you guys?
I thought I considered a lot of people. I considered Jerry Goldsmith for all I've talked about the music and sound. I considered Kim Hunter for how much I love Zira. I considered Heston. I'm gonna give it to John Chambers. I think for the time, especially, he crushed it on the makeup. Like I said, it's pretty astonishing to me that you could actually see the emotion with Zira, with Zayas at certain times. And I think it's just not the same. It is campy still, but there's a way that it could have been done where it's just it's too campy, and I think he knocked it out of the park.
Well, anytime they invent an Oscar and to give it to you,
yeah,
like it was. I think we had this conversation around John Dykstra for the Star Wars episode. It's like, listen, we don't have a category for this, but here you go. Like,
yeah, you deserve one.
Put on your tux. We're going to put you on stage and clap because, like, this was incredible.
That screen test that you mentioned earlier, Clint, it wasn't a screen test. It was like a proof of concept or something that they...
It was like a short film, yeah.
Yeah, like Heston shot a scene to they're trying to sell the studio on it. And the makeup in that, which I don't think was Chambers, is like a lot more subtle on Dr. Zayas. Like, he looks more human. And you could see how they could have gone in that direction, but I don't think it would have worked. It feels like just two Taylor and Zayas are just two humans talking. One's a little weird looking, but he doesn't seem like an ape, So yeah, Chambers is great. And then that makeup then became like a thing, like in pop culture too, right? Like he would I feel like Roddy McDowall showed up at the Oscars or something.
Yeah, Roddy McDowall made a thing out of it, for sure. There's part of me that wants to give it to Maurice Evans because all the stuff that we talked about with Dr. Zayas. I think Dr. Zayas and the way that character is pulled off, it kind of has an outweighed importance or an outweighed impact on how the movie ultimately plays. Like, I think a lesser performance of Dr. Zayas would kind of mustache twirl a little bit, and you don't get the same kind of analog with our society, which is, again, like the coolest thing about sci-fi like this. So I'd want to give, but honestly, like Michael Wilson probably gets it just because the script is so good and his actual experience. Again, my favorite part about science fiction when the fiction is more important than the science part of it. And, to make this, blown up episode of Twilight Zone work politically and for close to 2 hours while also still kind of being a thriller. Like, this is a great script. And two of the greatest lines ever delivered on screen. So I guess Michael Wilson and Rod Serling and whoever that producer is that's taking credit for some of it, they'll get it. Scott, this is the most important conversation that we'll have today, but where would you put Nicolas Cage in this movie? Not like additionally, you have to replace somebody with Nicolas Cage.
And it has to be better. That's what's tricky.
What character as played by Nicolas Cage would make this movie better?
Nova. Current era Nicolas Cage as Nova.
As Nova? Done. I think we can wrap it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not gonna beat that. I was like,
nope.
I don't know, Cornelius, but nope.
Well, because we have some issues with the Nova character, right? And I think Nicolas Cage could solve a lot of those issues.
Well, and also, what does it do to the energy of this movie if Zira is like, look, I got you a gift, and it's Nicolas Cage? That'd be pretty cool.
Oh my God.
So much love making, not enough love.
Not enough love. I got you a gift.
I really struggled with this before the episode.
Nicolas Cage.
Yes. I can't believe you just gave the perfect answer. No, it's Nova.
So I didn't have this on my list at all. Alex, did you have it on your list?
This is not an Alex joint.
I'm told Dan didn't have it either. So this is, ironically enough, in the episode that he's not even here for, Cal, I'm told, had this at number 72 on his list. So putting it, at number 72, that puts it out of the top 100 on its own. But it's now our number 80 on the top 100 because it's taking the place of OSS 117, which was my number 12. So there's math that checks out. Somehow.
I mean, we know that Dan doesn't make sense ever.
No, No, I blame
know
the
Dan is
algorithm
wrong.
for this completely.
Yeah.
Scott, where would you have had it? I mean, but like publicly, like, because privately, I know it's your number one and there's no real second place. But like, where do you want to admit to having this on your list? Would you? I mean, not precisely, but like top third.
Are my top 100?
Yeah.
Probably.
Like, would it be closer to the top than the bottom? Top half?
Yeah. I would say maybe top 25.
Wow, you just keep upgrading.
Well, I was trying to think. I was like, I know I have a top 10 list on IGN somewhere of my personal picks. So I'm trying to remember what was on that list. And if this was on that list, and that might have been. So
And
I would
then
say top
somebody's
20.
going to find that and make a liar out of it.
Yes. Yeah. Throw eggs at my house.
I wanted to make sure we mentioned that we asked Scott to do this like at the end of the day yesterday. He's had
Yes.
no time to prepare, but we were like, if
Yeah.
anyone could talk about this off the cuff, it's Scott.
gotta
And
be
we were
Scott.
correct. Yeah. We
Yep.
crushed it.
I didn't get a chance to fully rewatch it. I watched like the first half, and then I ran out of time, unfortunately.
That will do it for us this week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for agreeing, Alex, to watch all of those sequels. And Scott, thanks for pinch hitting today, man. Really appreciate you
Anytime.
sharing your undying and unconditional love for Planet of the Apes. Worked out great. But thank you to everybody else for watching. Thanks to producer Tayo Oyekan for leaving behind all those fossilized torfs in that one cave. Thank you to technical producers Amir, Rakib, and Marhyan Franzen for shooting Cal in the neck so he couldn't talk this week. And thank you to our DP, Jamie Parslow, for being the silliest little monkey. And Dan died in hypersleep, so we don't even need to mention him. But next week, we've got the final episode of Season 3, Alone Against the World. We didn't talk about, this is pretty obviously how this fits in with Alone Against the World.
Oh, yeah.
But also, it was a kick-in. This wasn't programmed by the algorithm, so it still works.
Well, it fits in surprisingly well then.
Yeah, no, it does great. But next week will be our last episode of Season 3, and just in time for Christmas. Well, I mean, unless you're watching this in the year 3978, then maybe we still have Christmas by then. But we are talking about, I think, maybe the most perfect example of Alone Against the World, Die Hard. So, between now and then, stay safe, be good, and take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes.